what would you say the Cultural Olympiads do for smaller, perhaps less represented or athletically prominent nations like Taiwan?
What it allows is to offer your chances for representation in very diverse forms. Because the Taiwan Pavilion is within La Villette.
We see the bubble tea, we see the slippers, we see banana. So there are some of these things that we think that can represent us. And I think it's a good thing to show the world that democratic, developed country with some diverse things that you can appreciate.
Imagine, with 2,700 projects, you have from the very, very tiny library from a small town in the more remote corner of France to Le Louvre. And they are all part of the Cultural Olympiad program.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. Did you know that the father of the modern Olympic Games, Pierre de Coubertin, himself won an Olympic gold medal? But it wasn't in a sporting event. In 1912, at the Stockholm Summer Olympics, Coubertin took the top spot on the podium for literature for his poem Ode to Sport. Now, this unique blend of art and sport, or muscles and mind as he described it, continues to play a significant role in the Games' cultural program, known as the Cultural Olympiad. And in Paris, Taiwan is grabbing a lot of attention at those pavilions. So for more on this, we are joined by Beatriz Garcia, Associate Director of the Center for Cultural Value at the University of Liverpool. And she's also serving as the Director of the Cultural Olympiad Evaluation section of the Paris 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Organizing Committee. And despite being very busy, she is joining us from Paris, where the Olympics are taking place. So, Beatriz, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Let me start with this. Tell us exactly what it means to be the Director of Cultural Olympiad Evaluation at these Games.
Yes. Well, what it means is that I have the beautiful task of documenting everything that happens in this extremely large and ambitious cultural program. In Paris, we have over 2,700 projects that are taking place all over France and also what they call the ultramer, no? So the foreign territories. It's a program of work that develops over 4 years. This is a tradition that was established also since Barcelona in 1992. So the idea of an Olympiad is to connect the end of one Games with the beginning of the next. So I document this process and I will be writing the report that explains the impact and the legacy of this important initiative. Important, but not very well known.
Absolutely. And I know the Olympiad at this moment of recording is not over yet. But, you know, we at the beginning of this program, in the intro, we talked about the significance of the Olympiad and being almost a medal event. What is the significance nowadays in modern day Olympics?
Yes, because you were right. The original idea by Pierre de Coubertin was to establish this as Olympic art competitions. Because in ancient Greece, where the origins of the Games in the 1776 BC started, the athletes would compete and also with the poets, with philosophers, with musicians. So at the very beginning and from 1912 until 1948, there were Olympic art competitions and artists would also get medals. This was very complex to run, in particular because the amount of countries contributing to the Games was diversifying. And the way of judging the works was becoming very hard. How you compare literature from Spain with literature from Japan or from Taiwan or from Mexico. So they decided to stop the competition and do festivals, art festivals instead. And since 1992, the idea has been to do this 4-year Cultural Olympiad. So the program has changed, but often people that are in the Games are not aware of it because obviously there is so much going on in the sporting venues. So the value of the Cultural Olympiad is mostly about the build-up.
In the Cultural Olympiad here in Paris, only about 13 places are represented. Can you tell us about those places and why it's so much smaller?
Yes. So the Cultural Olympiad doesn't come with very strict guidelines. It's not the same as the sporting competition. No? You have your 100 meters to run. And also it's different to distinguish it from the opening and closing ceremonies or the torch relay. These are very important symbolic aspects of the Games hosting process, but it's not the same as the Cultural Olympiad, which is the program inviting the host city and nation to present their artists, to present their cultural actors. So as there are no clear guidelines, the basic element is just to do something during the time of the Olympic Games, try to offer a cultural context to the Olympic Village so that the athletes connect with the city, and also do some activations for the guests, the IOC members and other high dignitaries. But normally cities want to do much more and surprise visitors as well as local communities. Often the emphasis is on the local representation. So obviously Paris is the protagonist of this Cultural Olympiad, but at times it's national. So both in the case of Paris and London, activities take place all across France. It's not often that they do international connections. So in the case of the Parisian Cultural Olympiad, what has been really important is to showcase France that goes beyond the continent. So that aspect, working with Guadeloupe, working with Tahiti, working with all of these foreign territories, and la francophonie has been really special. But the collaborations with other countries have been really, really small. I have to say there is a demand for more.
Now, one of those delegations and international connections you mentioned is the Taiwan Pavilion. Now, the pavilion is called, by Taiwanese media, is called the Taiwan Pavilion, which is more or less the messaging here in Taipei. But maps on the ground in Paris label it Chinese Taipei, following IOC rules. Can you explain the significance of this disconnect?
Yes. Well, this is also the heritage of the Olympic movement, how different countries are named. Is always very interesting. In fact, 2 years ago, I was in Taiwan. I was invited by the National Olympic Academy that had a session. And obviously, yes, in Olympic parlance, the name is Chinese Taipei. Has always been that way. Obviously, you yourselves have their own way also of referring to Taiwan, and I think most people that have visited or interacted with Taiwan will also refer to that. And I guess in terms of how culturally you explain those differences, that in itself is interesting and a curiosity. So I also did a lot of work with the World Design Capital that came to Taipei. I was in the jury. And it was interesting for me to see, how those layers, how you explain differences, also the way that you write the Chinese characters that are the old Chinese characters and are different, from mainland China. All of this is precisely what is so beautiful about an event as international as the Olympic Games. So yes, within the Taiwan Pavilion, you get the opportunity to set up those conversations, and indicate, who you are. The European partners also have a pavilion. There is the Olympic World Association that also has a pavilion. In fact, these pavilions are an opportunity to tell stories that probably people are not very aware of, the sensibilities and subtleties of how you define your identity.
Right. So on that note, as we mentioned, Taiwan is participating. Daniel Yu Kwei-sun, an adjunct assistant professor at Fujian Catholic University, tells us why it's significant for the island nation of 23 million.
We see the bubble tea, we see the slippers, we see banana. So there are some of these things that we think that can represent us. And I think it's a good thing to show the world that this is a democratic, developed country with some diverse things that you can appreciate. Of course, we have some elements from the Aboriginal cultures, these performers, these artists, they're showing that Taiwan has many different aspects. It's not just about the TSMC or the chips industry, right? It's about so many different kinds of cultures, of people living together in this country, to showing the world that, or doing some explanation that what this Chinese Taipei team truly represent. It's the name that we have to use, but these are the things we can demonstrate ourselves. Even that it's not the actual Olympics, but it's something we can put in this display to let people know, to have educate people what Taiwan really is.
So Beatriz, you touched on it earlier, but what would you say the Cultural Olympiads do for smaller, perhaps less represented or athletically prominent nations like Taiwan?
I think it does really important things, and it's the reason why it's such a significant dimension of the Olympics and of the Olympic experience. Because let's remember, it's not just about who is the loudest, it's about sensitivity, and it's about advancing our understanding of diversity, of our many faces. So yes, the Cultural Olympiad is precisely the platform to show the big and the small. Imagine, with 2,700 projects, you have from the very, very tiny library from a small town in the more remote corner of France to Le Louvre. And they are all part of the Cultural Olympiad program. So I think there is a real beauty of having this very inclusive program. From the international perspective, what it allows is to offer your chances for representation in very diverse forms. I was just reading, how, because the Taiwan Pavilion is within La Villette. La Villette is one of the parks in Paris, and you have a whole collection of other national houses. People can go there without tickets. The people that may have not access to the sport or have only seen one thing can just wander around and discover the Olympic world in a different way. And you get these opportunities to tell very small stories, from typography, from how French pronounce your name or how they write it. Obviously, food is normally very important. You show different foods or different music. It's nice, and it doesn't operate with the same rules. The Cultural Olympiad is far more flexible, and in that sense, it's also you can get many surprises. It comes with very little money, though. So you really need to be imaginative, and you need to find out your own needs. So it's like, I always say, the Olympic Games are very clearly defined, and you have these very clear rings with books and guidelines that are almost set in stone. You have the Olympic Charter, etc. The Cultural Olympiad is fuzzy. It's more fluid. It's harder to understand. And for instance, a lot of people, or the media, do not offer the same level of coverage. And often we forget that it exists. But when you get there, it's incredibly rich. And it has many, many layers because it's not constrained by as many rules as other aspects of the games, which of course have those rules because they have become the biggest event in the world and are seen by everyone.
Speaking of those lack of constraints, I hear that there are fitness and yoga classes at the Louvre. It must be quite amazing to be doing downward dog in such a space where so many masters also are exhibiting their work. But at the same time, what would you say has made this Paris Cultural Olympiad so distinct, not only from the national level, but also from the international level?
Well, you would be surprised to hear this, but for the first time in decades, the Cultural Olympiad in Paris has decided that everything in it needs to have explicit connection or celebrate explicit connection between art and sport. You would think that that is an obvious thing to do with a Cultural Olympiad, but often it has not been the case. And previous editions have done beautiful things, but just to show their own cultural agenda. in Paris, what you have had is really beautiful rediscoveries about what artists and athletes have in common, or in terms of a space, how interesting it could be to use a sporting venue to do a dance, or to bring, sporting individuals to a gallery or to a theater. So that has really opened up a lot of conversations between, in terms of public policy, for instance, France has a very, very strong cultural policy and a strong département de culture. For the first time, they are realizing how much they could collaborate with each other. I think internationally there are great ideas that could be taken forward. How national Olympic committees and the world of sport could benefit from working more closely with the artists, with the poets, with the philosophers to explain what you do. You know, that we should not be competing with each other. We can help each other. So I feel that is really one of the most determinant. And yeah, well, you were just seeing those images where obviously Paris is the protagonist almost in every sporting venue. What it does to the sense of beauty, being in Versailles and seeing the equestrian, the horses jumping, and then being in Le Château de Versailles and seeing all the sculptures and the paintings, and just seeing the notion of the relationship between humans and horses, it just takes you into another level. And the same with the urban sports, the same with swimming. So I think that will be a really memorable contribution from Paris.
Well, the ongoing Cultural Olympiad is quite special for Taiwan. The country has sent over 120 performers and artists to Paris, and that includes 22 groups who have been presenting 60 shows and performances, showcasing Taiwan's vibrant and diverse culture, as well as its art scene. Here's an introduction to the cultural team Taiwan.
我觉得台湾长期以来在历史上是一直被打压的。台湾几乎是在一个被压迫下，民间的那个文化是越来越具有变化跟那个韧性。
这里最核心的议题，大概就是台湾会以什么样的面貌呈现在这个所谓拉维特的文化展演的园区。跨族群、跨语言、跨形式、跨各式各样的表现的这一种，我们觉得那就是一个最靠近真实的台湾。台湾它不但是自由的社会，而且是被尊重跟被保障的社会。就是你不同的，你的差异是在这个文化里面被允许而且被尊重的。我们认为，这个人类社会是用加法来建造的。
那这种就是一个把传统文化当年被低估的那种传统文化，换个形式出来。
我们这次做了一个好棒的决定，好开心可以跟这些年轻的新一代的团队一起出发，然后他们绝对就是台湾的样子，绝对就是台湾最该向世界递出的那一张名片。
我觉得我对文化的认识非常简单，我觉得文化是变动的。台湾这么小，人也不多，可是吃的艺术属一直改造，可以有10几种，那就是台湾。所以台湾是百变的，很敢去呈现出一种纯粹肢体，或者对于环境、对于社会、对于世界、对于性别议题、对于环保议题，他就可以自己提出一个自己的看法。
在这么艰险的环境里面，我们维持一个怎样的文化？这个世界如果失去台湾，非常可惜。
7月27到8月10号，欢迎大家来巴黎的台湾文化场域，让我们一起 win together。
So So that's a taste of what's on offer from Taiwan. Beatriz, can you give us a sense of whether we've seen such an offering or a presence of Taiwan in previous Olympiads?
That's it. I cannot think of it being as clearly or as ambitious as a program. Obviously, with 206, I mean, now it's 205 nations that are contributing to Paris. At times it's 206. It's quite a lot to keep up with. But I do feel that probably, yes, the Taiwanese delegation have been particularly strategic in with the presence here and a beautiful location in La Villette. I see there has been a bit of coverage. So you have been attracting attention within the French media. And it's, for me, what this indicates is the value of having a well thought through cultural proposition when you come to the Games. Because the demand is there. I mean, the Olympic fans are really curious. The Olympic Games is very different from other sporting events because you tend to have people that are not just focusing on one sport, they are more transversal. And actually, what they enjoy is the sense of celebrating the world. Often people support teams that are not from their country, and you are very open to learning about other cultures. So in that sense, having a strong pavilion, having high quality artists and interventions in an Olympic context can go very far. And also important, is a different audience from the kind of audience you would get at a Venice Biennale or at any other classic arts and cultural festival scene. Here is people from all walks of life. There is not a particular specialism. And that means that you reach out to the real mainstream and you can open up curiosity to people that might have never thought of going to see a Taiwanese exhibition if it was in their city. The Olympics do that. No? They make you be a bit more curious and to try things that in other contexts you might think were not for you.
Right, let's now hear from some of Taiwan's performers on what it's been like playing to the crowd in Paris. Here's the musical group A-Roots leader Jipo Yang, followed by the director of eye-catching circus Mei Qiling.
所以像我们这次秀的主题叫 Holy God 仔，那我们有告诉他是 Holy God 仔，我们会跟他们说哦是像 Thank God 的意思。我觉得大家应该是会有 get 到我们想要表达的东西是什么。然后还有蛇舞，也是就是第一首下来，他们就可以1秒立刻无缝接轨跟上我们的节奏。我觉得很开心，因为观众的反应都很热情，然后从第一首到安口，就是大家的那个参与度都很高。
当我踏进台湾馆的展演会场的时候，我觉得完全可以感觉到台湾人跟台湾的活力跟活泼，然后在整个台湾馆里面流动跟绽放。目前的观众跟幕后的工作人员，每一个人都面带笑容，所有人的凝聚力跟目标都是同一个，就是要为整个选手、整个台湾的选手或者全世界的选手在加油打气。
Beatriz, one of the headlining performers at the Taiwan Pavilion was Nymphia Wind, that's a drag performer. But do you think the Cultural Olympiad goes far enough in being inclusive?
I think it does. Again, the issue is whether we use the Cultural Olympiad every time, because it's a name that at times people don't refer to. And there are lots of brands, there are lots of ways of referring to your cultural activities. So yes, in the case, I mean, both in Paris, in London, also in Pyeongchang, it was brilliant, the Cultural Olympiad of the Winter Olympics. You have many different types of projects that get included, but maybe not everyone refers to them as Cultural Olympiad. So the challenge for the Cultural Olympiad is to get everyone to use the same little logo or tag. So, for instance, in Paris as well, it has been called what they call la Olympiade Culturelle des Amateurs. No, the people that are not professional and also want to have the chance to be part of the Olympic experience. So, yeah, I think inclusion certainly has been one of the cornerstones of this Cultural Olympiad.
Now, I want to throw it forward a little bit. Given what you've seen in Paris, and it has been quite spectacular from the media we've seen, what would your advice be to LA, Los Angeles, which is holding the next Olympics, and if they were to hold a cultural element of it?
Yes, but you need to start early. They really need to start planning now, because you are the very first ones to be expected to deliver. You know, as soon as Paris is over, you start the Olympiad. The Olympiad starts at the closing ceremony, you know, when you pass on the torch, the flag. So they have to start early. It's very time consuming, and it comes with no budget attached, certainly not central budget. So you really need, the key to the Cultural Olympiad is negotiation, collaboration, partnership. It's about bringing many, many different interests alongside each other. If on top of it, we think of all the other countries that might also want to contribute, is, start that conversation. What are the sensitivities between the rules that come from the IOC centrally, you know, in terms of how your countries are formally presented as teams and delegations? What is the right thing to do on a cultural perspective, where you might have other layers, how to do it in a way that is sensible and that can be understood at different levels. Very important, use the street, obviously, reach out to people. If you have something complex and sophisticated, decide when is the right time to present it, and how diverse your audiences are, how much you want to be on the media, or how much you want to reach out to the young kids and work with the schools. So these are the big points.
And speaking of locations, Beatriz, what a beautiful location that is. I believe that's the media center at the Olympics. What a wonderful setting. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure.
And thank you for all our viewers everywhere. It has been good to have your company as always. If you've enjoyed today's episode or have anything you'd like to add to the dialogue, do join the conversation on our social media. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.